The bullet that shattered the general store window missed Martha Henley's head by less than 3 inches, and she did not even flinch. She stood behind the counter, her hand still resting on the bolt of calico fabric she had been measuring for Mrs. Dalton, and watched the glass fragments scatter across the wooden floor like scattered diamonds. Outside, the sound of gunfire continued, punctuated by wild whoops and the thunder of horse hooves racing down the main street of Redemption, Kansas. It was 1878, and bank robberies had become as common as Sunday sermons in these parts. Mrs. Dalton shrieked and dove beneath the counter, her elaborate hat with its artificial flowers tumbling to the floor. Martha calmly set down the fabric, walked to the window, and peered out through the jagged hole. 5 riders were galloping toward the edge of town, bandanas covering their faces, saddlebags presumably stuffed with the contents of Redemption Bank and Trust. Sheriff Morrison and his deputy were already mounting their horses in pursuit, though everyone knew they would return empty-handed by nightfall, as they always did. "Are you mad, girl?" Mrs. Dalton hissed from her position on the floor. "Get down before you get yourself killed." Martha turned back to the counter and retrieved the fabric. "The shooting has stopped, Mrs. Dalton. They are gone. Now you wanted 4 yards, is that correct?" Mrs. Dalton emerged from behind the counter, her face flushed, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and incredulity. "I do not understand you, Martha Henley. I truly do not. You have no sense of self-preservation, no feminine delicacy, no natural fear. It is unnatural in a woman. No wonder you are still unwed at 23. Martha had heard variations of this sentiment so many times that the words barely registered anymore. She wrapped the fabric in brown paper and tied it with string, her movements efficient and practiced. "That will be $1.20, please." Mrs. Dalton paid, snatched up her package, and headed for the door. But she paused at the threshold and turned back, her expression softening slightly into something that might have been genuine concern, or might have been pity. "You know, Martha, if you would just make a bit more effort with your appearance, wear some ribbons, smile more, laugh at the gentleman's jokes, you might still find a husband. You are not getting any younger." After she left, Martha swept up the glass in silence. She had heard it all before. Plain. Unmarriable, too tall, too thin, too serious, too quiet, hair the color of dead grass, eyes the color of dishwater, face like a wooden plank, no figure to speak of. The litany of her faults had been recited to her by well-meaning townswomen and not so well-meaning young men since she turned 16 and failed to attract any serious suitors. She did not particularly care. Or at least, she had trained herself not to care. Martha had more pressing concerns than whether she would ever wear a wedding dress. Her father had died 2 years ago, leaving her to run the general store alone. Her mother had passed when Martha was only 8. She had no siblings, no close relatives, no one to depend on but herself. The store was her livelihood, her independence, her entire world. Romance was a luxury she could not afford, even if anyone had been offering it, which they were not. The door opened again just as she was dumping the glass into the waste bin. She looked up, expecting a customer, and found herself meeting the eyes of a man she had never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he squinted into the sun often, and perhaps smiled more than frowned. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim trousers, scuffed boots, a leather vest over a chambray shirt, and a hat he removed as he entered, holding it politely against his chest. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the revolver well used but well maintained. "Afternoon, madam," he said, and his voice was deep and slightly rough, like whiskey over gravel. "I am looking for work. Heard in the saloon that the general store might need someone to help with heavy lifting and such." "That true?" Martha blinked. She had mentioned to Mr. Peterson at the feed store last week that she could use an extra pair of hands for unloading the freight wagons, but she had not expected anyone to actually apply. Most men in redemption considered working in a general store to be beneath them, even if the alternative was no work at all. "Perhaps," she said cautiously. "What is your name?" "Jesse McCade, madam." "I have been working cattle drives up from Texas, but I am looking to settle down somewhere for a spell. I am good with my hands, strong, honest, and I do not drink to excess or cause trouble." Martha studied him. He met her gaze directly, without the usual discomfort or dismissiveness she saw in most men's eyes when they looked at her. He did not seem to be looking through her or past her, cataloging her deficiencies and finding her wanting. He was simply looking at her, waiting for her answer. "The pay would be modest," she said. "Room and board included if you are willing to sleep in the storage room out back. I could use help with the freight, the heavy stock, repairs around the store. Can you do carpentry?" "Yes, madam. I can do most anything that needs doing." "The window needs replacing," she said, gesturing to the shattered glass. "Can you start today?" For the first time, Jesse McCade smiled. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger and somehow more real. "Yes, madam, I can. Thank you. You will not regret this." Martha was not entirely sure about that, but she needed the help, and he seemed capable. "There is a glazier 2 streets over, Mr. Thompson. Tell him to bill the store. I will show you the room and then you can get started." She led him through the store, past the shelves stocked with everything from canned goods to bolts of fabric, farming tools to patent medicines. The storage room out back was small but clean, with a cot, a washstand, and a trunk for personal belongings. Jesse set his saddlebags down and looked around with evident satisfaction. "This will do just fine, Miss Henley. Martha Henley. Miss Henley." He nodded respectfully. "I appreciate the opportunity." By the time the store closed at 6 o'clock, Jesse had not only replaced the window, but had also repaired a loose board on the front porch, reorganized the storeroom to make better use of the space, and unloaded an entire freight wagon that had arrived unexpectedly in the late afternoon. Martha watched him work throughout the day, impressed by his efficiency and his silence. He did not complain, did not need constant instruction, did not try to make awkward conversation. He simply did what needed to be done. When she locked the front door and turned to find him sweeping the porch, she felt something unfamiliar, gratitude mixed with relief. "There is a boarding house 3 blocks down that serves supper," she told him. "Mrs. Chen's place. The food is good and the price is fair. Tell her you work for me and she will give you a decent rate." Jesse leaned on the broom and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are not closing up and heading home yourself." "I live upstairs," Martha said. "Above the store. You live here alone." There was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. "Yes, it is more practical this way." He nodded slowly. "Then I reckon I should make sure everything is secure before I head out. A woman living alone above a store, especially after a bank robbery, well, it pays to be careful." Martha almost told him it was unnecessary, that she had been living this way for 2 years without incident, that she could take care of herself. But something in his manner stopped her. He was not being condescending or patronizing. He was simply being considerate, the way one human being might be toward another. So instead, she said, "Thank you, Mr. McCade. That is thoughtful of you." "Just Jesse, madam. Mr. McCade was my father." That night, lying in her narrow bed upstairs, Martha listened to the familiar sounds of the town settling into darkness. Somewhere down the street, a piano played in the saloon. A dog barked. A couple argued in loud whispers. And from the storage room below, she could hear the faint creak of the cot as Jesse McCade settled in for the night. She wondered what she had gotten herself into, hiring a stranger off the street. But there was something about him that felt steady, reliable, safe. And safety was something Martha had learned not to take for granted in Redemption, Kansas. The next morning, Jesse was up before dawn. Martha came downstairs to open the store and found him outside, chopping wood for the stove. She stood in the doorway, watching the smooth, practiced swing of the axe, the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt. She was not accustomed to having someone else take care of tasks she had been doing herself for so long. "You did not have to do that," she said when he paused to wipe his brow. "I know," he replied simply, "but it needed doing and I was awake." The days began to settle into a rhythm. Jesse proved to be everything he had promised: hardworking, honest, capable. He arrived at the store each morning before Martha opened the doors and stayed until she closed them at night. He handled the heavy work without complaint, dealt with difficult customers with patience, and even proved to have a knack for bookkeeping when Martha mentioned she was behind on her accounts. The women of Redemption noticed him immediately, of course. How could they not? A handsome, unmarried cowboy was a rare commodity in a town where available men were usually either too old, too wild, or too poor to be considered good prospects. Within a week, the store saw a dramatic increase in female customers, all of them suddenly in urgent need of supplies they could have easily purchased elsewhere. Miss Caroline Preston, the banker's daughter, came in 3 times in one afternoon, each time batting her eyelashes and finding excuses to linger near wherever Jesse was working. Mrs. Dalton's 2 unmarried nieces visited together, giggling and whispering behind their hands. Even the widow Henderson, who had to be at least 45, suddenly developed an interest in the quality of the store's sewing notions. Jesse was polite to all of them, but nothing more. He did not flirt, did not encourage their attentions, did not seem particularly interested in any of them. Martha observed this with a mixture of amusement and something else she refused to name. It was none of her concern if Jesse McCade wanted to court half the women in Redemption. She was his employer, nothing more. But then came the afternoon when Caroline Preston cornered Martha near the fabric display and said, in a voice dripping with false sweetness, "It must be so convenient for you, Martha, having a man like Mr. McCade working here. Almost like having a husband, I imagine, without any of the unpleasant obligations." Martha kept her expression neutral. "It is convenient to have capable help, yes. Of course, a man like that will not stay unattached for long. I heard my father say that Mr. McCade is saving his wages to buy some land, start his own ranch. He will need a proper wife for that, someone with grace and breeding, someone who knows how to run a household and entertain guests." Caroline smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Someone unlike yourself, I mean. No offense intended, of course." "Of course," Martha echoed flatly. After Caroline finally left, having purchased nothing despite spending 20 minutes examining merchandise, Martha found herself gripping the counter hard enough that her knuckles turned white. She was angry, though she told herself she had no right to be. Caroline had only spoken the truth. Jesse would move on eventually, find himself a pretty wife, build the life he wanted, and Martha would return to running the store alone as she had always done. "You all right, Miss Henley?" She looked up to find Jesse watching her with concern in his dark eyes. He had been stacking canned goods on the upper shelves and had apparently noticed her distress. "I am fine," she said automatically. "You do not look fine. You look like you want to throw something." Despite herself, Martha felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Perhaps I do." Jesse climbed down from the ladder and walked over to her. "Miss Preston say something to upset you. Why would you think that?" "Because every woman who has come in here this week has said something to upset you, except for old Mrs. Chen and the preacher's wife. And I noticed Miss Preston has a particular talent for leaving you looking like you have been chewing on nails." Martha was surprised that he had noticed. Surprised and oddly touched. She was simply being honest. There is no crime in that. Honest about what? About the fact that you will not be working here forever, that you have plans for your own future, that you will need a proper wife when you buy your land. Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She talked about herself as a candidate for that position, among other things." "And what did you say?" "What could I say? She is right. You will need a wife eventually, and you should choose someone suitable." Jesse leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed, but his eyes intense. "What if I told you that I have been in this town for 2 weeks now, and the only woman I have met who interests me in the slightest is standing right in front of me?" Martha's heart seemed to stop beating. Then it started again, hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I would say you need to have your eyes examined." "Why?" "Because I am not the sort of woman men find interesting. I have been told this repeatedly since I was old enough to understand such things. I am plain. I am unmarriable. I have no grace, no charm, no beauty. I am too tall, too thin, too serious." They were blind," Jesse interrupted quietly. "Every single person who told you those things was blind." Martha stared at him. "You cannot possibly mean that." "I do mean it." He straightened and took a step closer to her. Not close enough to be improper, but close enough that she could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes. "From the first moment I walked through that door, I thought you were the most striking woman I had ever seen. The way you hold yourself, like you could face down an army and not give an inch. The way you move, efficient and sure, like every action has purpose. The way you talk, plain and honest, no games or tricks. And your face, Miss Henley, your face is not plain at all. It is strong and true, and I find it beautiful." Martha could not breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her the way Jesse was looking at her now, as if she were something precious and rare. "I do not understand," she whispered. "What do not you understand?" "Why you would say such things. Why you would even notice me when women like Caroline Preston are throwing themselves at you." Jesse smiled, that same warm smile that transformed his whole face. "Because Miss Preston, for all her pretty dresses and fancy manners, does not interest me. She is like a dozen other women I have met in a dozen other towns. Pretty on the outside, empty on the inside. But you, Martha Henley, you are real. You are solid. You are someone a man could build a life with, not just admire from a distance." "You barely know me," Martha protested weakly. "I have been working beside you for 2 weeks. I have seen how you treat your customers, fair and honest even when they do not deserve it. I have seen how you work from dawn to dusk without complaint. I have seen your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. I have seen enough to know that I would like to see more, a lot more, for a long time to come if you will let me." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes, which horrified her. She never cried. She had not cried even at her father's funeral. But somehow, Jesse's words had cracked something open inside her, some long frozen place she had thought was dead. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "You do not have to say anything right now," Jesse told her gently. "I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that when those women come in here and say cruel things disguised as kindness, they are wrong. They are wrong about you, and they are blind to what I see clear as day." Before Martha could respond, the door opened and a customer came in, breaking the moment. Jesse returned to his work, and Martha served the customer in a daze. But for the rest of the day, she caught herself touching her face, wondering if what Jesse said could possibly be true. Could she really be anything other than what she had always been told she was? That evening, after the store closed, Martha found herself doing something she had not done in years. She went upstairs and stood before the small, cracked mirror that hung above her washstand. She looked at her reflection critically, trying to see what Jesse claimed to see. Plain brown hair pulled back in a simple bun. Gray eyes set in a thin face with sharp cheekbones and a pointed chin. A mouth too wide, a nose too long, a neck too thin. The same face she had always had, the same face that had been judged and found wanting by everyone in redemption. But for the first time she tried to look at it differently. Strong, Jesse had said. True, beautiful, she could not see it. But the fact that he could, the fact that someone could look at her and see beauty instead of plainness, value instead of inadequacy, that changed something fundamental inside her. Over the following weeks, something shifted between Martha and Jesse. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. A smile held a moment longer than necessary. Hands brushing accidentally when passing items back and forth. Conversations that extended past the purely practical into the personal. Martha learned that Jesse had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 5 sons. His family had owned a small farm, but there had not been enough land to divide among all the brothers, so he had struck out on his own at 18. He had worked cattle drives, ranch hands, odd jobs all over Kansas and Texas and Nebraska. He was 30 years old, had never been married, and was tired of drifting. "I want to put down roots," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch after closing, watching the sun set over the prairie. "I want land of my own, a house, maybe some cattle, a place that is mine. A life that means something." "And a wife?" Martha asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Yes," Jesse said simply. "A wife, children if God wills it, a family, but the right wife, someone who wants the same things I do. Someone who understands that building a life is hard work, not some romantic fairy tale. Someone with grit and heart and honesty." He turned to look at her then, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. "Someone like you, Martha." Martha's hands twisted in her lap. "Jesse, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know this is sudden. I know I am just a hired hand who showed up in your store 2 months ago with nothing but a saddlebag and a horse. I know you have every reason to be cautious, but I want you to know my intentions. I am courting you, Martha Henley, whether you realize it or not. I have been courting you since the day I met you." "Why?" The word burst out of her, raw and confused. "Why me, Jesse? You could have any woman in this town, prettier women, wealthier women, women with families and connections." Jesse reached over and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "Because you are the only woman in this town who makes me want to be better than I am. Because when I imagine my future, the face I see is yours. Because you are strong and brave and true, and those things matter more than pretty or wealthy or connected. Because, Martha, I am falling in love with you, and I cannot seem to stop myself even if I wanted to, which I do not." Martha sat frozen, staring at their joined hands. Part of her wanted to pull away, to protect herself, to refuse to believe that this could be real. But a larger part, the part that had been lonely for so long, the part that had secretly dreamed of exactly this even while telling herself it was impossible, that part made her turn her hand in his and lace their fingers together. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I have never been courted before. I do not know the rules, the expectations. I am going to do it all wrong." "There are no rules," Jesse said, smiling. "We just spend time together. We talk. We figure out if what we feel now is real and lasting, And Martha, you could not do it wrong if you tried. Just be yourself. That is all I want." So they courted in their own quiet way. Jesse continued to work at the store, but now he stayed for dinner in Martha's small apartment upstairs, and they would talk late into the night about everything and nothing. He told her stories about the cattle drives, about the places he had seen, about the people he had met. She told him about her childhood, about her parents, about the loneliness of running the store alone. They took walks together on Sunday afternoons, out past the edge of town into the rolling prairie. Jesse taught her to identify animal tracks, to read the weather in the clouds. Martha showed him the places she had loved as a child, the creek where she used to catch tadpoles, the old oak tree she had climbed despite her mother's protests. The town noticed, of course. Redemption was too small for anything to go unnoticed. The gossip spread like wildfire. Martha Henley and that cowboy. Who would have thought? She must be paying him extra. He must be after the store. It cannot possibly be real. Caroline Preston was particularly venomous. She made a point of stopping Martha on the street one afternoon and saying loudly enough for others to hear, "I suppose when a woman is as desperate as you must be, Martha, she will take whatever scraps of male attention she can get. Just do not be surprised when he moves on to someone better, once he has what he wants from you." Martha felt the old familiar shame rising in her chest. The voice that told her Caroline was right, that this was all a mistake, that she was a fool for believing someone like Jesse could truly want someone like her. But before she could respond, a hand closed gently on her shoulder. Jesse had appeared beside her, and the look on his face was colder than Martha had ever seen it. "Miss Preston," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge of steel, "I do not appreciate you speaking to my future wife that way. I would suggest you keep your opinions to yourself in the future, unless you want the whole town to know exactly what I think of women who mistake cruelty for cleverness." Caroline's face turned scarlet. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned on her heel and stalked away. Martha stared up at Jesse, her heart pounding. "Your future wife," she repeated faintly. Jesse's expression softened as he looked down at her. "If you will have me, I know I have not asked proper yet, but that is what I am working toward, Martha. I want you to be my wife. I want us to build that life I talked about together. I have almost saved enough to buy the Crenshaw property, the one just outside town. It needs work, but the land is good. We could have the store in town and the ranch both. We could have a real future." Martha felt overwhelmed. It was too much, too fast, too good to be true. "Jesse, I love you," he said simply. "I love you, Martha Henley, and I do not care who knows it. I do not care what the gossips say. I do not care that you do not wear fancy dresses or giggle at stupid jokes or bat your eyelashes. I love you exactly as you are, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." There, on the main street of Redemption, Kansas, with half the town probably watching from windows and doorways, Martha Henley did something she had never done before. She stood on her toes, put her arms around Jesse McCade's neck and kissed him. It was not a practiced kiss or an elegant kiss. It was probably not even a very good kiss. But it was real and honest and full of all the emotion she had been holding back for weeks. And when Jesse wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back, Martha felt something she had never felt before, beautiful. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jesse rested his forehead against hers and smiled. "I am going to take that as a yes." "Yes," Martha breathed. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you, yes to the future, yes to building a life together. Yes, Jesse." The next months were a whirlwind. Jesse bought the Crenshaw property as promised. It was 160 acres of good grassland with a small house that needed considerable repairs and a barn that was more hole than structure. They were married in October of 1878, in a simple ceremony at the church with Mrs. Chen and the preacher's wife as witnesses. Martha wore a dress she made herself from the nicest fabric in the store, a soft blue cotton that Jesse said matched her eyes in certain light. They spent their wedding night in the small house on their new property, with the wind whistling through the gaps in the walls and the stars visible through holes in the roof. Jesse carried her over the threshold and then stood with her in the middle of the empty front room, just holding her close. "It is not much yet," he admitted, "but it will be. I promise you, Martha, I will build you a home you can be proud of." "It is already perfect," Martha told him, and she meant it. The house did not matter. The land did not matter. What mattered was that she was standing in the arms of a man who loved her, who saw her as beautiful, who had chosen her above all others. For the first time in her life, Martha felt like she belonged somewhere to someone. They worked together to build their life. Jesse spent his days repairing the house and starting to build up a small herd of cattle, purchased with careful savings and shrewd trading. Martha continued to run the store, now with Jesse's full partnership. They hired a young man named Billy Stevens to help with the daily operations so that Martha could spend more time at the ranch. It was hard work, harder than anything Martha had done before. But it was their work, their life, their future. And at night, when they lay together in their bed listening to the prairie wind, Martha would sometimes think about all the people who had called her plain and unmarriable, and she would smile in the darkness. They had been wrong about her. They had been blind. The first winter was brutal. Snow came early and stayed late, burying the prairie under white drifts that made travel nearly impossible. Jesse and Martha found themselves snowed in for days at a time, working together to keep the cattle alive, to keep the house warm, to keep their spirits up when supplies ran low, and the cold seemed endless. One particularly bad night, when the temperature dropped so low that the water bucket froze solid inside the house, Martha woke to find Jesse adding every piece of furniture they could spare to the fire. She got up and wrapped a blanket around both of them, and they huddled together in front of the flames. "I am sorry," Jesse said quietly. "I brought you out here to this half-finished house, and now we are freezing. You would have been warmer and safer in your apartment above the store." "But I would have been alone," Martha replied, snuggling closer to him. "I would have been warm and safe and completely alone. I prefer this, Jesse. I prefer you." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, you know, more every day. I did not know it was possible to love someone this much." "I love you too," Martha said, and felt the truth of it warm her from the inside. She had not known what love was before Jesse. She had thought it was something that happened to other people, prettier people, more deserving people. But now she understood that love was not about deserving. It was about finding the one person in all the world who saw you clearly and chose you anyway. Who saw you clearly and chose you because of what they saw, not despite it. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, the grass turned green, and the prairie exploded with wildflowers. Jesse's cattle had survived the winter, and he bought more to expand the herd. Martha discovered she was pregnant in April, and the joy on Jesse's face when she told him made her cry, which seemed to be happening more often these days. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Martha asked, though she could see that he was. "Happy? Martha, I am so happy I could burst. A child, our child, a little person who is part you and part me. How could I be anything but happy? The pregnancy was not easy." Martha suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and as she grew larger, the physical demands of ranch life became increasingly difficult. But Jesse was endlessly patient and supportive, taking over her chores without complaint, insisting she rest even when she protested that she was perfectly capable of working. "You are carrying our child," he would tell her firmly. "That is the most important work there is. Let me handle the rest." Their son was born in December, just as the first snow of the year began to fall. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Chen, who had experience as a midwife. Jesse paced outside the bedroom for hours, listening to Martha's cries and feeling utterly helpless. But when Mrs. Chen finally opened the door and beckoned him in, and he saw Martha propped up in bed holding a tiny bundle, every moment of fear and worry evaporated. "Come meet your son," Martha said, her voice exhausted but radiant. Jesse approached slowly, almost reverently. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that squinted up at him with apparent suspicion. He was the most beautiful thing Jesse had ever seen, except for the woman holding him. "He is perfect," Jesse whispered. "You are both perfect. Thank you, Martha." "Thank you for this." They named him Thomas, after Martha's father. Thomas McCade, born December 15, 1879, 7 pounds and full of fury at having been ejected from his warm, comfortable existence. He cried lustily and often, especially at night, but neither Jesse nor Martha minded. They would take turns walking him around the house, singing soft songs, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. "I cannot believe we made this," Martha said one night, watching Jesse hold their son with such gentleness. "I cannot believe something so perfect came from us." "Why not?" Jesse asked, looking up at her with surprise. "You are perfect, so why would not our child be?" Martha shook her head, smiling. Even after a year of marriage, she sometimes still struggled to believe Jesse's assessment of her, but she was learning. Slowly, gradually, she was learning to see herself through his eyes, to accept that maybe, just maybe, she had never been plain at all. Maybe everyone else had simply been looking at the wrong things. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Jesse proved to have a natural talent for ranching, and his reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread throughout Kansas. The store continued to thrive under their shared management, with Billy Stevens eventually becoming a full partner. Martha and Jesse had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah, born in 1882, and another son, David, born in 1884. The house was expanded and improved, transformed from a drafty shack into a solid, comfortable home. They built a new barn, added more land, increased their herd. Life was good, better than either of them had dared to dream. But it was not perfect, because life never is. There were bad years when the weather destroyed their crops or disease struck the herd. There were times when money was tight and worry kept them up at night. There was the terrible week when Sarah caught scarlet fever and they thought they might lose her, sitting by her bedside day and night until the fever finally broke. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments of frustration and exhaustion, but through it all, they had each other. And that made all the difference. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jesse took Martha back into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury they could now afford. Mrs. Chen stayed with the children, shooing them out the door and telling them not to hurry back. As they sat across from each other at a table covered with white linen, candles flickering between them, Martha found herself thinking about how far they had come. "What are you thinking about?" Jesse asked, watching her face with that attentive expression she had come to love. "About how strange life is," Martha said. 5 years ago, I was convinced I would spend my entire life alone, running that store, growing old by myself. I had accepted it, made peace with it, and then you walked through the door and changed everything. "Best decision I ever made, asking for that job," Jesse said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Best decision of my life." Why did you? Martha asked. Really, I mean, you could have gone anywhere, done anything. Why did you stop in redemption? Why did you stay? Jesse was quiet for a moment, considering. Honestly, I do not know. I had been drifting for so long, and I was tired. Tired of moving, tired of never belonging anywhere. When I rode into redemption, something just felt right. And then I walked into your store and saw you standing there, and I knew. I cannot explain it better than that. I just knew. Knew what? That I was home. Martha felt tears prick her eyes, which still happened more often than she liked to admit. I love you, Jesse McCade. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Why does it scare you? Because I never knew I could be this happy. I never knew life could be this good. And sometimes I am afraid it is all a dream, and I will wake up alone in that apartment above the store, and none of this will have been real. Jessie squeezed her hand. It is real, Martha. I am real. Our children are real. Our life together is real. And it is going to keep being real for the next 50 years, God willing. You are stuck with me, Mrs. McCade. No escape. Martha laughed, wiping at her eyes. I suppose there are worse fates. As they left the restaurant and walked back toward where they had tied their horses, they passed a group of women standing outside the mercantile. Martha recognized them. Caroline Preston, now Caroline Briggs, married to a dry goods salesman and already looking worn and disappointed with life. Mrs. Dalton's nieces, both still unmarried and desperately angling for husbands. A few other women who had made Martha's life difficult in the old days. They fell silent as Martha and Jessie approached, their eyes following the couple with expressions ranging from curiosity to envy. Caroline's gaze fixed on Martha's dress, which was new and well made, on her face, which was happy and content, on the way Jessia's arm curved protectively around her waist. Good evening, ladies, Jessie said politely as they passed. The women murmured responses, but Martha could feel their stares boring into her back as they walked away. She waited until they were out of earshot, then said, They are talking about us. Let them talk, Jessie replied calmly. They talked about us 5 years ago, and they will talk about us 50 years from now. People like that always need someone to talk about. It used to bother me, Martha admitted. The things they said about me, but it does not anymore. Is that strange? Not strange at all. You know who you are now. You know what you are worth. Their opinions do not matter. Martha leaned into his side as they walked. I know what I am worth because you showed me. You were the first person who ever looked at me and saw something of value. I saw what was always there, Jessie corrected gently. I just had better eyes than most folks in this town. They rode home under a sky full of stars, the horses moving at an easy pace, in no hurry to end the evening. When they reached the ranch, they could see lamplight in the windows of their house, warm and welcoming. Home. Their home. Their life. As the years continued to pass, the McCade Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Jessia's reputation as a fair and honest rancher grew, and he was eventually elected to serve on the town council. Martha expanded the general store, adding a section for ranch supplies that proved immensely profitable. Their children grew strong and healthy, educated at the schoolhouse in town and at home by their parents. Thomas inherited his father's quiet competence and his mother's sharp mind. By the time he was 15, he was managing significant portions of the ranch operation. Sarah was spirited and strong-willed, with her mother's practical nature and her father's charm. She scandalized the town by announcing at age 12 that she intended to become a veterinarian, and neither Jessie nor Martha saw any reason to discourage her ambitions. David was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, talking about seeing the world beyond Kansas. Let him dream, Jessie told Martha when she worried that David was not interested enough in the ranch. We have Thomas for that. David will find his own path. In 1890, when Martha was 35 and Jesse was 37, they faced their greatest challenge. A particularly harsh drought struck Kansas, lasting through the entire summer and into the fall. Water sources dried up, grass withered, and cattle died. Many ranchers were forced to sell their land at devastating losses. The store's business dropped dramatically as people had less money to spend. Jesse and Martha sat up many nights, going over their accounts, trying to figure out how to survive. They sold off part of their herd at rock-bottom prices, just to reduce the number of animals they had to water and feed. They dipped into their savings, then borrowed money from the bank. The stress showed on both their faces, in the lines around Jesse's eyes and the tightness in Martha's jaw. "We might lose everything," Jesse said one night, his voice raw with frustration and fear. "Everything we have built, all these years of work, it could all be gone." "Then we will start again," Martha said firmly. "We did it once. We can do it again." "Martha, I am 37 years old. I cannot start over from nothing at this age." "You are not starting from nothing. You have me. You have our children. You have your skills and your reputation. Even if we lose the ranch, even if we lose the store, we still have what matters most." Jesse pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "How are you so strong? How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Because you taught me," Martha replied. "You taught me that I was strong. You believed in me when no one else did. Now I am returning the favor. We will get through this, Jesse, together." And they did. The drought broke in late October, and winter rains refilled the creeks and ponds. They had lost more than half their cattle, and their savings were gone, but they still had the land and each other. They rebuilt slowly, carefully, taking no unnecessary risks. Within 3 years, they had recovered their losses and were prospering again. In 1895, on a warm spring evening, Jesse and Martha sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over their land. The children were grown, or nearly so. Thomas was 21 and managing the ranch with increasing independence. Sarah was 18 and preparing to leave for veterinary school in the fall, and David was 16 and talking about attending college in the East. "We are going to be empty nesters soon," Martha observed. "What will we do with ourselves?" Jesse chuckled. "I imagine we will find ways to occupy our time. There is always work to be done on a ranch." "That is true." Martha was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you ever regret it?" "The life we chose. We could have done things differently. Sold the ranch, moved to a city, given the children more opportunities." "Never," Jesse said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life right here with you, raising our children on this land, it is everything I ever wanted. More than I ever dreamed I could have. What about you? Do you regret it?" Martha thought about the question seriously. She thought about the girl she had been 17 years ago, standing behind the counter of her general store, convinced she would die alone and unmourned. She thought about all the people who had told her she was plain, unmarriable, worthless. She thought about the moment Jesse McCade walked through her door and changed her entire world with his quiet presence and seeing eyes. "No," she said softly, "I do not regret a single thing. Except perhaps that I wasted so many years believing what other people told me about myself. I should have known better." "You were young," Jesse said charitably, "and you had no reason to believe anything else. No one had ever told you different. Until you." "Until me," he agreed, smiling. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years of practice. "They said you were plain and unmarriable. I looked at you and said they were blind, and I was right, was I not?" Martha laughed. "Your confidence remains unshaken, I see." "It is not confidence, it is fact. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever known, Martha McCade. inside and out, and every day I spend with you convinces me more completely that I am the luckiest man alive." "Charmer," Martha teased, but her eyes were soft with love. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A hawk circled overhead, riding the evening thermals. The prairie grass rippled in waves as the wind moved through it. Everything was peaceful, settled, right. "Do you remember the night we met?" Jesse asked suddenly. "There was a bank robbery. A bullet came through the window. I remember. Mrs. Dalton hid under the counter. But you did not. You just stood there, calm as could be, like bullets flying through windows was an everyday occurrence. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met." "I was not brave," Martha said. "I just did not care very much what happened to me. I had nothing to live for, no one who would miss me if I died. It made me reckless, not brave. And now I am terrified every time something dangerous happens, because I have everything to lose. You, our children, this life. Now I have reasons to be careful, to want to survive, to fight for tomorrow. You gave me that, Jesse. You gave me a reason to live." Jesse lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You gave me the same thing. Before you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose, direction, meaning. You gave me a home." As darkness settled over the prairie, they went inside together, hands still clasped. The house smelled like the bread Martha had baked that morning and the coffee that was always warming on the stove. Pictures hung on the walls now, photographs of their family, drawings Sarah had made as a child, a framed newspaper clipping from when Jesse won the prize for best cattle at the county fair. This was their life. Not perfect, not always easy, but theirs. Built from nothing but hard work and love and faith in each other. That night, lying in bed with Jesse's arm around her, Martha said into the darkness, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Really seeing me. For being the first person who ever looked at me and saw something worth loving." Jesse pulled her closer. "You do not have to thank me for that. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. It is as natural as breathing." "I love you too," Martha whispered. "More than I can ever properly express. You saved me, Jesse, not from danger or poverty or anything dramatic. You saved me from a life of loneliness and believing I was worthless. You saved me from myself." "Then we saved each other," Jesse replied. "Because I was lost before I found you, wandering with no direction, no purpose. You gave me everything that matters. You gave me a reason to stop drifting and start living." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, as they had done for 17 years, and would continue to do for many more to come. The turn of the century brought changes to Redemption and the surrounding territory. Kansas was well established now, no longer the wild frontier it had been in the 1870s. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and more commerce. The town grew, adding new buildings, new businesses, new families. The old general store was eventually sold to a young couple from the East, though Martha stayed on as a consultant for several years, helping them learn the business. Jesse and Martha settled more fully into their roles as prosperous ranchers. The McCade Ranch was known throughout the region for quality cattle and fair dealing. They employed several ranch hands now, and the operation had grown far beyond what they had originally imagined. Thomas took over more and more of the daily management, and in 1898, at age 23, he married a sensible young woman named Elizabeth Henderson, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. They built a house on the far side of the property and started their own family. Sarah did indeed become a veterinarian, one of the first women in Kansas to do so, and she practiced in redemption, caring for animals and scandalizing the old-fashioned townspeople in equal measure. David went east to college and became a teacher, eventually returning to Kansas with a wife and a passion for education reform. Jesse and Martha became grandparents, then grandparents again, and again. Their house was always full of noise and laughter when the grandchildren visited, which was often. Jesse proved to be a doting grandfather, patient with sticky hands and endless questions in a way that surprised no one who knew him. Martha made cookies and told stories and taught the grandchildren the same lessons her own children had learned. Be honest, work hard, treat people fairly, and never let anyone tell you what you are worth. In 1903, Martha turned 48 and Jesse turned 50. They were both graying now, lines etched deep around their eyes and mouths, but they were healthy and strong and still deeply in love. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch, inviting everyone in Redemption and the surrounding area. It was a warm October day, the kind of perfect autumn weather that makes you grateful to be alive. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food brought by friends and neighbors. Children ran wild through the grass. Music played, and people danced. Jesse and Martha stood together, watching it all with satisfaction and wonder. 25 years, Martha said, shaking her head. I can hardly believe it. Feels like yesterday, Jesse replied. Feels like 100 years ago, both at the same time. We have been very lucky, Martha observed. Lucky and blessed, and probably a few other things too. Jesse turned to look at her, his expression serious. Martha, I want to say something, and I want you to really hear me. All right, Martha said, curious. You have made my life worth living. Every single day of these 25 years has been better because you were in it. You are my partner, my best friend, my love. You are the reason I get up in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every day that you took a chance on a drifting cowboy who walked into your store looking for work. Martha felt tears threatening, as they still did whenever Jesse said things like this. You make it sound like I did you a favor. But Jesse, you are the one who gave me everything. You are the one who looked at a plain, unmarriable woman and saw something worth loving. You were never plain, Jesse said firmly. Not for a single moment. You were always beautiful. Everyone else was just looking at the wrong things. An old woman approached them then, leaning heavily on a cane. It took Martha a moment to recognize Caroline Preston Briggs. She had aged badly, her face sour and pinched, her body bent. She looked at Jesse and Martha with an expression that might have been envy or might have been regret. Congratulations, she said stiffly. 25 years, that is quite an achievement. Thank you, Caroline, Martha replied graciously. Caroline hesitated, then said, I was wrong about you, about both of you. I thought it would never last. I thought he was using you. I was wrong. It was as close to an apology as Caroline was likely capable of giving. Martha felt a wave of compassion for this bitter, unhappy woman. We were all young once, she said gently. We all made mistakes. After Caroline walked away, Jesse said quietly, You are a better person than I am. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her cruel words all those years ago. What would be the point? Martha asked. She knows she was wrong. That is punishment enough. Besides, I am too happy to hold grudges. She cannot touch what we have, Jesse. No one can. The party continued into the evening. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Jesse pulled Martha onto the makeshift dance floor and swept her into a waltz. They were not elegant dancers, never had been, but they moved together with the ease of long practice and deep familiarity. What are you thinking about? Jesse asked, noticing the faraway look in Martha's eyes. About that girl I used to be, Martha admitted. The one standing behind the counter of the general store, convinced she would die alone. I wish I could go back and tell her that it all works out. That happiness is coming, she just has to wait a little longer. Would she believe you? Probably not, Martha laughed. I certainly would not have believed anyone who told me my future held all this. A husband who loves me, children, grandchildren, a successful ranch, respect in the community. It would have seemed impossible. Nothing is impossible, Jesse said. I learned that the day I met you. Oh, what did you learn? That sometimes, when you are tired and lost and do not know where you are going, you walk through a door and find exactly what you needed, even though you did not know you were looking for it. I found my home that day, Martha. I found my purpose. I found my heart. Martha rested her head against his chest as they danced, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the strength of his arms around her. I love you, Jesse McCade. With everything I am, with everything I have, I love you. I love you too, he murmured into her hair. Today, tomorrow, forever. You are my everything, Martha. My absolute everything. They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by friends and family, and the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love and faith in each other. The years continued to flow like a river, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, but always forward. Jesse and Martha grew older, their hair turning fully white, their movements slower, but their love remained as strong as ever. They were fortunate in their health, both remaining active and engaged well into their 60s. They saw their grandchildren grow up, watched some of them take over the ranch, and others strike out to make their own paths in the world. The McCade name became synonymous with integrity and quality throughout Kansas. The ranch prospered even as Jesse handed more and more responsibility to Thomas and the next generation. In 1918, Martha turned 63 and Jesse turned 65. The world was at war, though it seemed very far away from their corner of Kansas. They sat on their porch as they had done for decades, watching the sunset, holding hands, comfortable in their silence. You have any regrets? Martha asked suddenly. It was a question she had asked before, but somehow it felt important to ask again now. None, Jesse said firmly. Not a single one. This life, our life, it has been everything I could have wanted and more. What about you? Martha considered. She thought about all the years, all the joys and sorrows, all the triumphs and challenges. She thought about the woman she had been and the woman she had become. She thought about the man who had looked at her and seen beauty where everyone else saw plainness, value where everyone else saw inadequacy. No regrets, she said softly, except perhaps that I did not believe in myself sooner, that I let other people's opinions shape how I saw myself for so long. But you learned, Jesse pointed out. You became the strongest, bravest person I know. That is what matters. I learned because you taught me, Martha replied. You showed me that I was worth loving. Once I learned that lesson, everything else fell into place. Jesse squeezed her hand. We taught each other. That is what marriage is, I think. Two people learning and growing together, making each other better than they could be alone. We did all right, did we not? Martha said, looking around at the ranch, at the house they had built and rebuilt and expanded, at the land they had worked and nurtured and passed on to their children. We did more than all right, Jesse said. We did extraordinary. We took nothing and turned it into something beautiful. Not just the ranch, not just the business. We took two lonely, lost people and turned them into a family. That is magic, Martha. That is real magic. As the sun slipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Martha leaned against Jesse's shoulder and felt complete contentment wash over her. She was 63 years old, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a successful businesswoman, a respected member of her community. But more than all of that, she was loved. Truly, deeply, unconditionally loved by the man beside her. They said I was plain and unmarriable, she said quietly, almost to herself. Jesse pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. They were blind, he said, just as he had said 40 years ago. They were completely and utterly blind, but I saw you, Martha. I saw you from the first moment, and I have never stopped seeing you. You are the most beautiful thing in my life. You always have been. You always will be. Martha closed her eyes and smiled. After all these years, his words still had the power to move her, to make her feel cherished and valued and beautiful. She had learned to see herself through his eyes, to believe what he believed about her. And in doing so, she had discovered that the person everyone called plain and unmarriable had simply been waiting for someone with the wisdom to see her truly. Jesse McCade had been that someone. He had walked into her store on an autumn afternoon in 1878, looking for work, and he had stayed to build a life. Their life. Together. And it had been, without question, the most beautiful life either of them could have imagined. In 1922, Jesse McCade died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 69. He had been working on the ranch just the day before, still strong and active despite his age. Martha woke in the morning to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still resting on hers. She sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the man who had been her everything for 44 years. The funeral was enormous. People came from all over Kansas to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him. But for Martha, it was all a blur. She moved through the days in a fog of grief, unable to quite believe that Jesse was really gone, that she would never again hear his voice or feel his arms around her or see his smile. Her children gathered around her, offering comfort and support. Thomas and Elizabeth moved into the main house to be with her. Sarah came from town and stayed for weeks. David arrived from the east with his family and postponed his return. They were all worried about her, she knew. They thought she might not survive losing Jesse, might simply give up and follow him into death. But Martha had learned too much from Jesse to give up now. He had taught her that she was strong, that she was valuable, that she had worth beyond what anyone else thought of her. And she honored his memory by continuing to live, to work, to engage with the world. She lived another 12 years, dying in 1934 at the age of 79. She remained active in the ranch and the community until the very end, sharp-minded and strong-willed. She saw the ranch pass fully into the hands of her grandchildren. She saw the Depression come and threaten everything they had built, but the McCade Ranch survived because the family pulled together, just as Jesse and Martha had always pulled together in times of trouble. On the day before Martha died, her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around her bed. She was tired but peaceful, ready to go. Sarah held one hand and Thomas held the other, and she looked at each of them in turn, seeing Jesse's eyes in some, his smile in others, his strength and kindness reflected in all of them. "Tell me about Grandpa," one of the great-grandchildren asked, a little girl of about 7 named Emma. "Tell me how you met," Martha smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "He walked into my store looking for work. I thought he was just another drifter passing through, but he looked at me differently than anyone ever had before, like I mattered, like I was worth seeing." "What did he say?" Emma asked. "He said that everyone who called me plain was blind," Martha said softly. "He said I was beautiful, and he spent the next 44 years proving it to me every single day." "Were you happy, Grandma?" Emma asked. "So happy," Martha whispered. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible. Your grandfather gave me the most precious gift anyone can give another person. He taught me to see my own worth. He taught me that I deserved love, and then he loved me with everything he had for as long as he lived. I want to love like that someday," Emma said wistfully. "Then wait for someone who sees you clearly," Martha advised, her voice growing fainter. Do not settle for someone who wants to change you or who tolerates you. Wait for someone who looks at you and sees everything you are and everything you could be and loves all of it. That is the kind of love worth having. That is the kind of love that lasts. She closed her eyes, and the memories washed over her. Jesse walking through the door of the general store, dusty and road-worn but with kind eyes. Jesse replacing the broken window and organizing the storeroom. Jesse telling her she was beautiful. Jesse kissing her on the main street of Redemption while the whole town watched. Jesse carrying her over the threshold of their half-finished house. Jesse holding their newborn son with tears running down his face. Jesse beside her through every trial, every joy, every ordinary moment that made up a life. "I am coming, Jesse," she whispered, so softly that only Sarah, leaning close, heard her. "Wait for me just a little longer." Martha Henley McCade died that night, surrounded by the family she and Jesse had created, in the house they had built together, on the land they had worked side by side for more than 40 years. She was buried next to Jesse in the cemetery on the hill overlooking their ranch, under a simple headstone that read, Martha McCade, 1855–1934. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she was beautiful, and she was. Not because she had perfect features or fashionable clothes or any of the things the people of Redemption had judged her lacking. She was beautiful because she had lived fully, loved deeply, worked hard, raised good children, built something lasting, and never given up even when life was hard. She was beautiful because one man had seen her clearly and loved her unconditionally, and in doing so, had taught her to see her own worth. The McCade Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, along with the story of Jesse and Martha. How they met, how they fell in love, how they built a life from nothing. How everyone said she was plain and unmarriable, and how he looked at her and said they were blind. It became a family legend, a reminder that true beauty is not about appearance but about character, that true love sees clearly what others miss, and that the most beautiful lives are the ones lived with courage, honesty, and faith in each other. Jesse and Martha's story lived on long after they were gone, because it was the kind of love story that matters. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real story about real people who found each other against the odds and chose to build something beautiful together. A story about seeing and being seen, about valuing and being valued, about loving and being loved exactly as you are. They said she was plain and unmarriable. The cowboy looked at her and said they were blind, and in the end, he was right. Everyone who had judged Martha Henley and found her wanting had been looking at the wrong things. Jesse McCade had seen clearly from the first moment, and his clear vision had changed both their lives forever. That was the real legacy they left behind, not just a prosperous ranch or a successful business, but the knowledge that true love sees clearly, values deeply, and transforms completely. That when the right person looks at you and really sees you, everything changes. That beauty is not about what you look like, but about who you are and how you live and who you love. And that sometimes, just sometimes, a drifting cowboy walks through a door and finds his home in the eyes of a woman everyone else called plain. And together, they create something more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The end.